Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Melanie Cassar, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Officer Cadet Connor Liston. This evening, we commemorate the 105th anniversary of the start of the Third Battle of Ypres. After mid-1917, following mutinies in the overstrained French army, British forces assumed an even greater role in the war on the Western Front. Attacking from Ypres in Belgium, the British Commander-in-Chief, Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig, sought to break out of the so-called Ypres salient and reclaim the Belgian coastline from the German army. Following the success at Mézine in June, which removed the Germans from the British southern flank, the offensive began in earnest on the 31st of July, 1917. Australian forces were brought into the offensive on the 20th of September, where they took part in an attack along Menin Road. Attacking on a narrow front supported by immense amounts of firepower, the battle was a great success. Further successful advances followed at Polygon Wood on the 26th of September and Broodseinde on the 4th of October. The fighting went on in appalling weather and with crippling losses. The Australians took part in unsuccessful attacks at Pau-Coppel on the 9th of October and Passchendaele on the 12th of October. In just over a week, there were almost 11,000 Australian casualties. Finally, with the British Army stuck in low-lying muddy fields, which were churned up by months of artillery fire, the bloody offensive came to an untidy end in November. Many would afterwards refer to this offensive as a series of battles by the name of the village that had become the last objective, Passchendaele. All 5 Australian divisions took part in the Third Battle of Ypres. In 8 weeks of fighting, they had incurred over 38,000 casualties. No breakthrough was achieved. The costly offensives, ending with the capture of Passchendaele village, occurred after the Australians had been relieved by the Canadian Corps. This widened the Ypres salient by a few kilometres. Official historian Charles Bean later reflected on the carnage, writing, "I have often thought that many a youngster, when he was hid out there on the Passchendaele heights, and he knew that the end had come, must have thought to himself, well, at least they'll remember me in Australia." Today, we remember the Third Battle of Ypres. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. This evening, we are honoured to welcome Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Club Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are
If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Norman David Freeman. Norman Freeman was born on the 8th of October 1895 in Southport, Queensland, one of 6 children born to Ernest and Kedron Freeman. Norman received his schooling at the Southport School on Queensland's Gold Coast. He participated in rowing and athletics, as well as earning prizes in the school's shooting competition. Upon graduating, Freeman enrolled as a staff cadet at the Royal Military College Duntroon, one of 2 Queenslanders to be accepted that year. Freeman's training was cut short in order to allow him and his fellow officers to volunteer for service abroad. He enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 12th of April 1916 at the age of 20. He was assigned to the 9th Field Artillery Brigade with the rank of lieutenant and embarked in May aboard troop ship Argyllshire. Freeman arrived in England in July and underwent further training before embarking for France in December. In January 1917, he was transferred to the 8th Field Artillery Brigade. By July, Freeman had been transferred again, this time to the 42nd Battalion. Freeman's first major action with the battalion took place near Waterton, a small village in Belgium. Here, the 42nd and 43rd Battalions were tasked with destroying German defensive positions and providing a diversion for offensives taking place further north. The battalions encountered fierce resistance, suffering from shelling and machine gun fire, but were successful in reaching their objectives. By the end of the operation, casualties totaled almost 200, 40 of whom were killed. Among the dead was Lieutenant Norman Freeman. Freeman's family received a telegram on the 11th of August stating that their son had been wounded. It was not until the 25th that their fears were confirmed. News reached his family informing them that Lieutenant Norman Freeman had been killed in action. He was 21 years old. Base records were unable to give any details of Freeman's death to his bereft family. His father wrote to his son's batman, Gunner Grigor, to ask for particulars about Freeman's fate. In response to the details provided by Grigor, he wrote, "I thank you kindly for the information conveyed in your letter, and it is some little consolation to us all to know that he did not suffer. We all dreaded the thought that perhaps he had been wounded and lay out in the open before death ended his suffering. He was indeed a son to be proud of, and his memory will never fade." Despite Freeman receiving a proper burial at the time of his death, the location of his grave was lost. In 1928, base records wrote to Freeman's father to inform them that his son's remains had been found. I am now in receipt of advice that during the course of exhumation works in the vicinity of Messine, the Imperial War Graves Commission was successful in recovering the remains of this officer, which have since been interred with every measure of care and reverence in Sanctuary Woods Cemetery, Belgium. Identification of Lieutenant Freeman's remains was made possible by 2 identity discs, which were recovered during exhumation. These discs were forwarded to his family. Base records noted, these mementos, though now somewhat impaired by long exposure, will doubtless be valued on account of their former intimate association with the late officer, and I trust they will come safely to hand. His bereft parents erected a small memorial plaque to their son in the local church, inscribed with the words, "God's will be done." His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Norman David Freeman, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.